So the last one went on too long, and also it stopped in the middle. So I was trying to just say that white supremacy has been with Kentucky for quite some time. Right after you had the Civil War, right? During the Civil War, the main guy was sitting there saying the governor of Kentucky was saying that I'm not going to fight against the Confederacy. So he was against Lincoln's plan and against Lincoln's war, but eventually the legislature drove him out. They went to Bowling Green, tried to do some shit, didn't work, and there was no Confederacy here. So most Kentucky fought for the North, fought for the Union, and most Kentuckians fought for the North. Right? We won. We picked the winning side, but afterwards we had all these Confederate governors. So they said, it's a clever little saying or whatever, but it's essentially true. Kentucky seceded after the Civil War. They didn't win the military battle, but they lost the political battle, and they lost the culture battle, right? It's, a lot of people, oh, I'm in the South. Kentucky's centrally located, so it's not in the North or the South. But for anybody to be like, I'm South, or I'm North, that you don't make any sense. You're Kentucky. You're in the middle. You're the heartland, you could say. You're in the middle, but you're not north. You're not south. Maybe northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky is more north. Southern Kentucky is more south. You could say something like that. But yeah, they had all these Confederate governors, and you had all these Confederate governors. They just go on and on and on. Right afterwards, you had, Thomas Bramlett. Thomas Bramlett himself was chosen by Lincoln, but immediately, he wanted 13th Amendment, but he didn't get it passed, or the 14th or the 15th Amendment. He was against the Freedmen's Bureau. He hated blacks being in the Union Army. He thought that the Stephen Burbridge, who's a badass from Georgetown, Kentucky, Stephen Burbridge, one of the best Kentuckians out there, somebody that I want to read up on more. Stephen Burbridge is like Willis Russell, William Justice Goebel, Stephen Burbridge. They are badasses that fought for the right side at a very strong and courageous, way before it was actually right to fight in a strong, courageous way for the things they were fighting for. So that's right after you had Thomas Bramlett. He was pro-Lincoln, and then like in 62, 63, and then 1 year later he said he was going to bloodily baptize Kentucky into the Confederacy. So, he's not exactly a big Lincoln fan, so he was pissed off that blacks were going to be put into the Union Army, and he was like, oh, watch out, I'm going to go into the fucking Confederacy. You better watch who he threatened, right? Then you had, after him, you had the Helm, Governor Helm, who was the governor after Bramlett. He was arrested in 1862 for being a Confederate. You had Stevenson, who was a Confederate. Preston Leslie, Confederate. Another Kentucky governor, James B. McCreary, who fought with John Hunt Morgan, which was the thunderbolt of the Confederacy. So, Confederate. John Luke, or Luke Pryor Blackburn, Confederate. J. Proctor Knott, Confederate. Simon Bolivar Buckner, who was also known for the Honest Dictate scandal in the Hatfield-McCoy, bloody Rowan County. He was a Confederate general. So Simon Bolivar Buckner, who is, Helm, Stevenson, Leslie, McCreary, Blackburn, Knott. He's fucking seven governors after the Civil War who's still Confederate. So Kentucky elected 7 governors after the Civil War who were ex-Confederates. It wasn't until, 8. 8 is after Simon Bolivar Buckner, but Buckner was a Confederate general, okay? So some people might say, well, Helm was arrested for being a Confederate, but that might not make him a Confederate. You go to Simon Bolivar Buckner, he's a Confederate general, so he's as Confederate can get. And that's 7 governors away from the Civil War, right? And then John Y. Brown. John Y. Brown's a Confederate. John Y. Brown is, of today, who owns a fucking KFC. And he was a governor. So we had nice businessmen, fucking fascism becoming government. Like, that's fucking great. That's fascism, right? When business. And so, what the fuck would a white supremacist, slave-owning, Indian genocide piece of shit, why would they give a shit, right? Why would they care about anybody that they're oppressing? So that's up until 1895, you finally get William O'Connell Bradley, who was a Republican, and we want the Republicans because the Democrats were the fucking white supremacist piece of shit fucking low life, you know, just plantation owning Indian genocide and psychopath oppressors. That would be the fucking people that were, you know, that were opposed to. So finally we get a Republican in there. You get some sort of order. You get less lynchings, less black people are getting lynched, and you have less feuds. So, you know, the Confederates brought in a whole host of fucking issues and problems. People are so pissed off they lost their fucking slaves. The white supremacists so fucking mad that Lincoln, you know, thought that there should be equality, that black people should be citizens who had a right to vote, free of discrimination. Kentucky was so fucking mad about that. You know, it's no surprise in 2004 that they would vote inconsistent of their bigotry. It's also no surprise that when you have like somebody such as Hargis Davis, which is a man experiment with new media in the hometown county I was from, Gallatin County. He used to be a Democrat, but now he's a Republican. Why are these people switching over like that? Well, that's because the Republican Party is now the racist party of white supremacy. And so when they look at the Democrats, they don't see the party of white supremacy with the Democrats. They see it with the Republicans. And so that's why you see this sort of the exact opposite, you know, a trajectory is happening right now. Kentucky has white supremacy. They've had a strand of white supremacy for since 1774. 1774, War of 1812, you know, 64% of those who died were Kentuckians in the War of 1812. 30 of the 120 counties were named after the Indian genociders. So we're naming things. We have all these monuments of all these oppressors and all these murderers and genociders. We have a big-ass Confederate statue at U of L. We don't have any statues or monuments of the Union soldiers. There is one, I think, in Mason County somewhere, or somewhere up near Mason County, but it's the only one in all of Kentucky. So we got big-ass fucking phallic symbol for the Confederates, but we don't have any tribute to the 100,000 who had died, or the 25,000 African-American slaves who had fought in the Civil War for, you know, their own freedom, plus for the Union, right? It was for the Union and for anti-slavery. So that's who we have. You know, James B. McCreary actually fought with John Hunt Morgan, who was a thunderbolt of the Confederacy. So you had, you know, the trend for Confederates just keep on going. Like, I almost want to break Kentucky down like into different eras, because I think Kentucky is situated in American history, but it's actually very central in some of the beginnings of America when America goes wrong. Kentucky is the first West in Harrodstown when they started settling west. So there's the 13 colonies, and then they would travel through the Appalachia, the Cumberland Gap, and Harrodstown is the first town in the west. So the first westward expansion from sea to shining sea was started with a settlement in Kentucky. So that's where the whites had started settling. Then after they brought slavery in with them, and so again we got oppression, we got oppressors. We've got, you know, white supremacy. We've got genociders. We've got, you know, it's all coming along with the people, with Daniel Boone and with James Harrod and all the rest. So we have it all the way up until, that's the beginning, that's 1774, 240 years ago, pretty much a blink, right, a blink in time. And then you have the Civil War, where we're fighting for the Union, and then we win, and then we choose to be with the Confederates. So the white supremacists who had been running things for so long in Kentucky continue to run things. And then they ran things, you know, the governor of Kentucky was a Confederate up until 1895. Here in Louisville, you had a Confederate named John Henry Whalen, who eventually died in 1913. You also had the Henry Watterson, who established the Courier Journal, got an interstate named after him, and an elementary school named after him, who was part of the Ku Klux Klan. And so the member of the Ku Klux Klan, this big cultural leader, died in 1921. So just to show you some continuity, you know, the Civil War didn't end slavery and then it was over. White supremacists continued to run Kentucky. White supremacists was even running here in Louisville. They was even running in Louisville, even though it's a chocolate city. right? But it's essentially there's not many black folks that live in all of Kentucky. There's 22% is the demographic for African Americans in Louisville. So that's you know, it's just showing the consistent trend. John Henry Whalen, he died in 1913, but he was able to get 4 mayors elected, 4 Confederate mayors, including a Paul C. Barth. Paul C. Barth, who had shot himself in the head because of some, you know, they thought he stole a horse. And so there's a Paul Barth that just went to prison recently, last year. Today, his grandchild or son or grandchild, that makes more sense, of the Paul C. Barth, who was the mayor. So we see a connection. We see continuity. The Kentucky Derby. I mean, they were farmers, plantation owners, right? The Kentucky Derby only benefits those who raise horses. That's nobody in Louisville, nobody in this city, nobody in, you know, the West End, nobody in the East End is raising horses. These are for the planters. These are for the rich aristocratic landowning class of people. There's only a certain, you know, person that's going to be making any money in the Kentucky Derby. So we see continuity. We see continuity with the white supremacists of yesterday with the white supremacy of today. Paul Barth, he goes into prison for you know, stealing $200,000, so extortion or stealing money from a children's charity. So that's what we still see. The corruption is still there. We still see, you know, it's the same name, so it's the same bullshit. This is last year that this has happened. So, you know, we see all these trends, and so are there Confederates still around today? Do we have Confederates that are running Louisville today? Do we have Confederates that are, you know, running Kentucky? Is it the white supremacists, these genociding fucking elitist, you know, pieces of shit? Are they still running things? And in 1975, that's when finally Louisville integrated with the anti-busing riots. So you have the new right is rising up, and for 20 years, Louisville didn't do shit about the board of Brown versus Board of Education. So they didn't do shit about integration until 75, when finally they were forced to fucking integrate, and white people just massive on the streets, just a mini civil war, throwing rocks at the cops, throwing rocks at the buses that were carrying the black kids into school, being intimidating, just going around, just starting shit, starting trouble. The Grand Dragon, Philip Chopper, Walter Groves, KKK of Louisville was all there, and they actually had to bring out the National Guard, and the national press was mocking them. I mean, these are just hordes of fucking white people coming out saying, you know, we need to stop black kids from going into our schools. And really, why I don't see why white people, that can only redeem white society by starting to accept other cultures, because since the beginning, for 240 years, Kentucky has not been accepting any culture, anybody else's. Their culture is almost, you know, backwards and stupid, and it's retarded. And it is retarded because that's why we're #1 in pollution and mental health, and the poorest mental health, and high prison rates, and cancer, and, you know, all this many horrible statistics that Kentucky claims. And so, of course, you know, we have white psychopaths, white supremacist fucking piece of shits who's fucking, you know, controlling things. And these oppressors only understand domination and control. They don't understand empowerment. They don't understand love and compassion. And they don't, you know, they don't want to appeal to people's hopes. They want to appeal to people's fears. Do as I say or else I will hurt you. That's how they understand power. And so that's 1975 is when we finally integrated. So that's, you know, 7 years later, I'm going to be born. So 7 years before I was born, they wasn't even integrated here in Louisville. 1976 is when Kentucky finally passes the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. So slavery was finally abolished in Kentucky 6 years before I was born. And also the citizenship, how to become a citizen, and making discrimination for black folks at the polls illegal. And then 2007, we have the parents involved in community schools versus the Seattle School District, which undoes the 75 order. So Louisville was the last city to integrate, and the first city to unintegrate, to possibly to resegregate. With 75, we were the last city to integrate, and then 2007, it was a lawsuit of Seattle, the community parents versus Seattle, that had happened in 2007, so we were the first to unintegrate by busing. So first to integrate, first to resegregate. Louisville, Kentucky. No wonder they're shooting so many people. No wonder Louisville's so fucking racist.